At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
I had these 2 fucking dogs that I didn't choose.
Good morning. It's Saturday, Rules Saturday, June the 28th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have no free lunch, effective interpersonal communications, rules for retrogrades, the sovereign child, motivation, meditation, and moral politics. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David Bahnsen.
People who lack the capacity to earn a decent living need to be helped, but they will not be helped by minimum wage laws, trade union wage pressures, or other devices which seek to compel employers to pay them more than their work is worth. The more likely outcome of such regulations is that the intended beneficiaries are not employed at all. James Tobin. Fixing the price of a wage above the value of the work the wage produces results in less workers being hired and no wages being paid to the workers not hired because of this price-value distortion. This is not a partisan notion, and it never has been.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from the book Effective Interpersonal Communications, Method 19, Normalize, also known as I Was Feeding My Unicorn Method. Talking like your view is the reality gives you a certain edge over your opponent. It has a two-way effect. One, you're more alert and focused, which means you talk with more belief in your words and are not easily swayed by the opinions and arguments of your opponent. Two, it makes you sound like you know what you're talking about, so your opponent gets swayed and confused by your words more easily, and also gets irritated that you keep talking as if everything you're saying is the absolute truth and not open to debate. This method is not just limited to repeating and emphasizing your point. The normalize method includes other cues which normalize your argument, like adding "you know" before sentences, or replying with phrases like obviously or definitely when someone asks about the truth of something you agree with. Phrases like "you know what I mean" and "the person I'm speaking with knows what I mean" are particularly helpful when you don't have an adequate response to something or want to avoid a protracted discussion. In short, anything that normalizes your beliefs and makes them look universally agreed upon is a part of the normalize method. This method is important because remaining silent when your right to respond is being taken away only makes people bolder. If you don't say anything the first time, the next time they will pretend they have done nothing wrong. However, some people misuse this method. They normalize things that are not true. Here's an example. Zaki is playing football with his friends. During the match, Zaki kicks the ball and it goes behind a tree in the playground. A high-pitched shriek comes out from behind the tree. Zaki and his friends go to have a look. They see a girl sitting behind the tree. "Were you hit by the ball?" they ask. "No, a lizard ran across my foot." Despite that, Zaki's friends start teasing him. "Zaki, you hit a girl. How bad." When Zaki protests that the girl said it was because of a lizard, they say, "Oh, she was just being nice. We all saw the ball go behind the tree where she was sitting." When they meet another friend who wasn't at the scene, they tell him, "Beware of Zaki. He hits girls." Like this, they normalize the falsehood that Zaki likes hitting girls. Incidents like this happen all the time, where children accuse each other of things they didn't do and raise false rumors. Sometimes adults also indulge in such behavior, but normally adults have a more sinister agenda at the back than just making fun of somebody. The point is that such rumors start looking real to other people even when they are false. Just because someone says something, people start believing it to be real, even when they themselves saw something completely different. On the other hand, if a person is suffering yet doesn't say anything, people completely ignore him and, with time, forget that that person ever suffered. This method is a perfect example of how our psychology works. We just see what's in front of us and don't make the effort to understand the deeper meaning of things. In the direct method as well, we saw how just because Brutus spoke and gave his side of the argument first, the people believed his side of the story and were ready to forgive him for murdering somebody they otherwise respected and cherished. Because that was the only version of the story they had heard, that version became normalized in their minds, and they didn't bother to make an effort in their minds to think that a different perspective on Caesar's murder could exist. However, when Antony came up with his views on the subject, the people suddenly began siding with him. So, what we learn here is that whoever speaks more often and presents his thoughts more clearly, his opinion will start to have more effect on both the opponent and any audience present. It's important, therefore, to express yourself and to put your thoughts into words so people know what you want them to believe in. And that was chapter 19, Normalize, from the book, The Effective Interpersonal Communications. And next week is method 20, Play Dumb. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, rules for retrogrades.
Rule 39. The retrograde rejects any and all racist, statist, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic perversions of conservatism associated with the alt-right. Alt-right is non-right. It is false conservatism, ideological refuse to be identified, decried, and jettisoned. Intellectually, the alt-right worldview proves to be piffle, falderall, without pedigree. But practically, as a stalking horse in the popular mind for Catholic conservatism, it presents the mortal danger of mistaken identity. The radical news and commentary media will hasten to identify retrogrades as alt-right because they customarily slander all non-moderate, non-tepid opposition parties in this boilerplate fashion. It is the new standard of radical Western journalism, depict any and all parties rejecting one world government and instead espousing national sovereignty as alt-right. Simply put, to be retrograde is to pose a superlative threat to the radical mainstream. We are the one true movement of classical anti-racism and anti-bigotry. Radicals will never be deterred from their calumnious false narrative by hard facts, however. The retrograde worldview insists on patriotism, borders, and turning back the clock for a highly specific reason: love of Christ and his moral code. The alt-right worldview merely apes these sympathies from a tawdry resentment for the Christian teleology which insinuates them. These alt-right rogues can easily be popularly confused for retrogrades because they customarily fight nuclear, like retrogrades. Like that of the retrogrades, alt-right rhetoric lacks the doddering domestic impotence of the mod cons. The alt-right is possessed of some fire in the belly, which makes it stand out amongst moderate mainstream wordplay. But their wicked principles are basically diametrically opposed to ours. The real secret behind the radical rush to characterize alt-right as conservatism inheres in the fact that alt-right is actually nothing more than the anti-globalist alt-left. Both rivals of the retrograde, radicals and alt-right, prove to be materialistic egalitarians who favor mob-rule democratic institutions which reject the timelessness of the immutable natural law and the dignity of the individual. Consider the identical nature of the radical left and the alt-right on the following substantial issues. They both favor centrally planned socialist economy. They both fixate on a determinist view of race and personal identity, whereas the retrograde adopts a position of Thomistic, colorblind individualism. They both harbor a cultural and policy antipathy to Christianity and a longing for a robust and binding surrogate for it. Each side cherishes abortion, population control, and eugenics. Moreover, modern radicalism is often implicitly neo-pagan, whereas the alt-right is explicitly neo-pagan. Consider this passage from an article in Vice. Quote, "There's a war going on in the American pagan community. On one side are racists who see gods like Odin and Thor as an embodiment of the supremacy whites have over the rest of the planet. On the other are the practitioners who believe these gods transcend racial lines and belong to everyone. Recently, the contention between these two groups has reached a tipping point as anti-racist pagans try to claim the narrative around their faith before it is overtaken by alt-right racists. Although the leaders of Nazi Germany were obsessed with paganism and the occult, it has largely been associated with multiculturalism here in the United States. Unquote. Like all paganism, all bigotry, all eugenics, all anti-Christianity, all collectivism, alt-right is to be repudiated wherever the retrograde encounters it, which is practically nowhere except on the internet, given the alt-right's exaggerated yet small presence in American life.
Thank you. So the best way to handle alt-right is to say, what? Was when I first heard alt-right, I was like, I thought, what? And that's the best thing you can do. Otherwise, you end up, they want to create a gratuitous argument or fight. Alt-right doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean a damn thing. But they want you, they'll say it because they are hoping that you're going to go ahead and do some research and try to figure out what is alt-right. And then maybe engage in some type of a gratuitous argument with them about who's alt-right and who isn't, or what alt-right means, etc. When the easiest way to shut these people up, because that's what you have to do, is just simply ask, what? What's alt-right? And follow-up questions could be, I still don't understand. What are you babbling about? Another good one is to say, if they're explaining, is to say, I still don't know what you're talking about. Did you get this information from those idiots on The View? Who told you to say that? Those kinds of things. All of these questions put them in the position, the burden of proof. They have to prove that there is such thing as an alt-right. They're the ones that are going to have to define what alt-right means and prove, therefore, that alt-right is something that actually exists. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the sovereign child. Last week we started chapter 10, which is the philosophical underpinnings. We did the first part, and now we're going to do part 2 of that chapter. And this section is called Knowledge Needs No Authority. This all may seem highfalutin and removed from everyday life, but nothing could be further from the truth. Our daily lives present us with a series of problems, conflicting options, and decisions. Do we wake up or sleep in, have coffee or tea, eat a filling breakfast, or take a snack for the road? Our minds produce a constant stream of candidate solutions, conjectures, as well as a stream of criticisms. Maybe I'll sleep in and take the morning off? No, I did that last week and my boss got angry. Maybe I'll just sleep for 5 more minutes? When solutions work well, we keep using them until a better idea comes along or until circumstances change. I'm going to interrupt real quick. That's key because what he's describing is making the presumption for the status quo. Let me read it again. When solutions work well, we keep using them until a better idea comes along or until circumstances change. Very important. Back to the book. We are all growing knowledge throughout the day. Often, this might not look much, especially when we rely on habits and background knowledge that we take for granted. But even when we are going about our day as usual, we constantly encounter new circumstances and ideas, and we always have the choice to modify our routine. Ideally, we can welcome these changes as opportunities to make things better, to improve our habits, to discover novel interests and possibilities. This theory of knowledge stands in stark contrast with the conventional view that our knowledge is what has been justified by the evidence, the research, or some authority on whom we can rely because they hold a particular virtue, often signaled by a degree or credential. This mistaken theory of knowledge, justificationism, holds that true ideas can be distinguished from false ones, according to which ideas are justified in light of some criteria. Justification typically involves adding up the weight of the evidence from the research or appealing to the consensus of experts. Once an idea is determined to be justified in this way, it is separated from the unjustified ideas and added to the stack of ideas called knowledge. Experts gatekeep this stack and try to keep it clean of falsehood, thereby presuming that our knowledge is pristine without error truth with a capital T. This conventional view of knowledge has many flaws. For one, justification always needs an authority, justified according to whom or what. Fortunately, most thinkers today recognize the fallacy of appealing to authorities as it leads to an infinite regress. For each authority, we can simply ask again, authority according to whom or what? In the past, this line of questioning would stop at the priestly class who would claim investiture with the ultimate authority. I'm going to stop again here. This is basically what she's missing, or he's missing, Aaron Struppel, the author, is missing, is agreement. As I've said before, I was raised when you get into an argument and it's a yes it is, no it isn't kind of a situation. You get to that particular point where you can't make any progress. What you do is you look for an authority that you can both agree on. So when we were kids, we would pick a teacher. Hey, let's go ask Miss Edgar, our 5th grade teacher. And whatever she says goes, okay? So we go to the Miss Edgar. She clears things up for us. We know who's right or who's wrong. And every once in a while, we're embarrassed to find out that we're both wrong. As adults, I had an argument with somebody in which we settled it by calling the library. We both agreed that the librarian would settle the argument. Okay. Now, and did we consider this ultimate knowledge, the ultimate capital T truth? No. We're just simply looking to settle the argument. Okay. So when you go into court, you're doing the same thing. If you and your neighbor can't come to an agreement over a particular issue, you may decide to go to court and let a judge and or jury decide the matter. Okay. So, but you agree to do that. You and the other person agree to go into court and have other people they have the final word. And again, for the purpose of settling the argument. It's not necessarily the capital T truth. It's just it's true that the jury found one way or another, or maybe the jury was hung. The judge ruled in a particular way as far as evidence is concerned, and that's truth. Back to the book. Modern justificationists hold no truck with divine authority, but they've replaced the priests with the data or the evidence or the observations. But this just raises the same pesky question. Who decides what counts as evidence? We've already talked about that. Our observations don't come prepackaged with instructions for how to interpret them. If they did, we could just read those instructions, although we'd have to wonder why those instructions and not any alternative. Early people interpreted the observation that night follows day as evidence that the sun revolves around the earth. Later, people reinterpreted the same observation as evidence for the opposite. Who is right? Who is the high priest of evidence? Today, the fashion is to use complicated math and statistics to calculate who is probably right. And so researchers and statisticians have become our new priests who interpret the book of nature for us, mulling over their esoteric formulas, and then letting us all know what they've decided. And again, we're in this situation here where the author's not quite right on this because we all have to make decisions. That's the whole point. As the author's already pointed out, you get up in the morning, you can't wait for a scientist and scientists to come to a consensus. You need to decide. So the earth is round. The earth was flat until we knew it was round. And the earth will remain round until we know better. We know what we know until we know better. So let's see, back to the book. Critical rationalism says that explanations are never justified. Rather, candidate explanations are simply conjectured, and then we come up with reasons why any one of them might be wrong. In criticizing all the candidate theories on offer this way, we tentatively discover which of the explanations best account for evidence. Evidence is still crucial, but it always comes after the conjecture. The theory, the theory that the earth revolves around the sun is correct not because of the weight of the evidence, but because that theory best accounts for many other observations, such as the motions of the other planets and stars. No authority, no justification is required during this entire discovery process. Instead, we simply and tentatively go with the explanation that best accounts for everything we observe. Taking children seriously is simply the recognition that in the realm of parenting, the source of knowledge does not determine its validity, that knowledge does not require authoritarian justification. On the contrary, knowledge creation is an entirely egalitarian enterprise. Anyone's conjecture might solve the problem at hand. Anyone's criticism might be reason to choose one path over another. Kids' ideas are just as valid as adults, and they should be taken seriously and accounted for in any solution to any conflict. And again, my question on this is what happens when you have, let's say, and as I've said before, you want to go somewhere, and then your kids say, well, we want to go to the beach. Take us to the beach. What are you going to do? Are you going to do what you normally want to do, or are you going to and say no to your kids? Or are you going to say no to yourself and take your kids to the beach? Okay, here's another one. How about this one? 14-year-old kid comes home, and again, you're the sovereign child guy, and your 14-year-old comes home with his girlfriend, and he says, you guys need to sleep somewhere else tonight, because me and my girlfriend are going to use your bed and bedroom to have sex, and she's going to sleep here the whole night, and we want privacy, so you need to leave. What are you going to do? Are you really going to go ahead and say, oh, okay, well, in that case, we'll go get a hotel, have a good time? No, you're not. It's ridiculous on its face. So that was The Sovereign Child by Aaron Struppel. And I'm reading this book because I want people to understand what the left is telling itself. And thank you. And now, motivation. And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Dark Triad.
Dr. Peterson explains the Dark Triad. Take a look.
Personality that was based on pathology, like on the dark side. And he called that the Dark Triad. Machiavellianism. That means Machiavellian is someone who, so let's say, if I was Machiavellian in our discussions, what I would have done was think, before I came here, I thought, well, what can Joe offer me? A narcissist, that's the next part of the Dark Triad, is someone who wants social status without doing any of the work. They want all the attention. If you're dating a narcissist or in a relationship with a narcissist, they'll alienate all your family members and your friends so that they get all the attention. And that'll just be the first of the games they play with you.
Yeah.
Then you have psychopathy, and the psychopaths are parasitical predators. And so the predator will take whatever you've got, and the parasite will live off you. And then here's...
The Dark Triad represents the unholy trinity. Look no further than the notoriously malevolent serial killer Ted Bundy. Charismatic, cunning, and remorseless. These Dark Triad types embody the following traits. Narcissism, having an inflated sense of self-importance and a constant need for admiration. Behind the mask, a fragile ego craves validation. Machiavellianism, embodying the art of manipulation, where trust is an illusion and every action is calculated. using others as mere tools for personal gain. Psychopathy, marked by a lack of empathy and remorse. Cold and calculated, a true predator in human form. Beware, as dark triad types tend to hide in plain sight. Would you recognize a dark triad type?
And that was Dark Triad. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Candace.
Il n'y a que cette affaire. Ouais, je sais, mes joggings, c'est bientôt ceux-là qui vont sortir, mais encore plus bombe atomique, je l'ai déjà dit. Bref, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Donc j'ai dit au designer, je t'en supplie, donne-moi une pochette, j'ai pas envie de sortir avec mes sacs de marque antipathique, Lux et compagnie, je déteste. Je lui ai dit, file-moi la blanche, parce que vous savez que je l'ai orange et en bleu. Et je me suis dit comme ça, tacalac, c'est très agité, n'est-ce pas? Prendre l'avion. Ouais. Et je lui ai raconté que j'avais plein de petites
D'ailleurs,
choses.
D'ailleurs, je l'ai même offert une pour Marc.
Ouais, Blake Carrington, il en a. Ah, il y a un mec qui m'a dit, comment il va Blake? Comment il va votre mari? Pas très bien, mais qu'est-ce que vous voulez qu'il se passe? Bref, insulte. Donc...
Je lui rapporte son colis.
Ouais. Donc voilà, moi j'ai mis mon porte-clés. Alors, si la confrérie demande le porte-clés, peut-être que nous pourrons le mettre sur le site internet.
Ah bon?
S'ils veulent. Pourquoi pas. En tout cas, moi j'ai adoré parce que ça va très bien avec le sac designer. C'est pour ça que j'ai voulu. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Designer s'appelle Jessie dans la marque. Hein. Je répète, mon bande de contre. Voilà. Je vais voyager comme ça. Au courant. Très agité, très fraîche, comme d'habitude. Il n'y a que cette affaire. Ouais, je sais, mes joggings. Il n'y a que cette affaire. Ouais, je sais, mes joggings.
And that was Candace. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of auctioneering.
She is truly the gold standard in thoroughbreds. This is the incomparable Songbird.
All right, you bet. I think we to get about ready to entertain a bid. What do you want to give? I think we to get about $2 million. $2 here, $2 here, $3. I'm at $2 million now. $3 million here. We to get about $3 million, $4 million. I get $3 million here. We to get about $4 million here. We to get about $5. Now $6 million on her. At $5 now $6. Now $6 million on it here. We to get now $7. Now $7 million. Now $7. Now $7 million on it here. We to get $7. Now $5. Now $7. $5. $5 to get $8 million. $500. At $8 million. $5. You to get $5. You to get about $8 7. $8 7. $5 here. We to get about $9 million. $500. $9 million. $500 here. We to get $9 595. $9,700,000 and thank you up there. $9,500,000.
Congratulations, Mr. Porter, and thank you.
And that was a little bit of auctioneering. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining you're losing, mean in debates? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, when you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Chapter 2 of Moral Politics.
Chapter 2. The Worldview Problem for American Politics. Puzzles for Liberals. Conservatives are fond of suggesting that liberals don't understand what they say, that they just don't get it. The conservatives are right. The ascendancy of conservative ideology in recent years, and in particular, the startling conservative victory in the 1994 congressional elections, have left liberals mystified about a great many things. Here are some examples. William Bennett, a major conservative politician and intellectual leader, has put a major part of his efforts into moral education. He has written the Book of Virtues, an 800-page collection of classical moral stories for children, which has been on the bestseller list for more than 80 straight weeks. Why do conservatives think that virtue and morality should be identified with their political agenda, and what view of morality do they profess? Family values and fatherhood have recently become central to conservative politics. What are those family values? What is that conception of fatherhood? And what do they have to do with politics? The conservative Speaker of the House of Representatives, embracing family values, suggested that the children of welfare mothers be taken away from the only families they have known and be placed in orphanages. This sounded like a contradiction of family values to liberals, but not to conservatives. Why? Conservatives are largely against abortion, saying that they want to save the lives of unborn fetuses. The United States has an extremely high infant mortality rate, largely due to the lack of adequate prenatal care for low-income mothers. Yet conservatives are not in favor of government programs providing such parental care, and have voted to eliminate existing programs that have succeeded in lowering the infant mortality rate. Liberals find this illogical. It appears to liberals that pro-life conservatives do want to prevent the death of those fetuses whose mothers do not want them through stopping abortion, but do not want to prevent the deaths of fetuses whose mothers do want them through providing adequate parental care programs. Conservatives see no contradiction. Why? Liberals also find it illogical that right-to-life advocates are mostly in favor of capital punishment. This seems natural to conservatives. Why? Conservatives are opposed to welfare and to government funds for the needy, but are in favor of government funds going to victims of floods, fires, and earthquakes who are in need. Why isn't this contradictory? a liberal supporter of California's 1994 single-payer initiative, was speaking to a conservative audience and decided to appeal to their financial self-interest. He pointed out that the savings in administrative costs would get them the same health benefits for less money, while also paying for health care for the indigent. A woman responded, "It just sounds wrong to me. I would be paying for somebody else." Why did his appeal to her economic self-interest fail? Conservatives are willing to increase the budgets for the military and for prisons on the grounds that they provide protection. But they want to eliminate regulatory agencies whose job is to protect the public, especially workers and consumers. Conservatives do not conceptualize regulation as a form of protection, only as a form of interference. Why? Conservatives claim to favor states' rights over the power of the federal government. Yet their proposal for tort reform will invest the federal government with considerable powers previously held by the states. The power to determine what lawsuits can be brought for product liability and securities fraud, and hence the power to control product safety standards and ethical financial practices. Why is this shift of power from the states to the federal government not considered a violation of states' rights by conservatives? In these cases, what is irrational, mysterious, or just plain evil or corrupt to liberals is natural, straightforward, and moral to conservatives. Yet, the answers to all these questions are obvious if you understand the conservative worldview, as we shall see below. Puzzles for conservatives. Of course, most conservatives have just as little understanding of liberals. To conservatives, liberal positions seem outrageously immoral or just plain foolish. Here are some corresponding questions that conservatives have about liberal positions. Liberals support welfare and education proposals to aid children, yet they sanction the murder of children by supporting the practice of abortion. Isn't this contradictory? How can liberals claim to favor the rights of children when they champion the rights of criminals, such as convicted child molesters? How can liberals claim empathy for victims when they defend the rights of criminals? How can liberals support federal funding for AIDS research and treatment, while promoting the spread of AIDS by sanctioning sexual behavior that leads to AIDS? In defending gay rights, liberals sanction homosexual sex. They sanction teenage sex by advocating the distribution of condoms in schools. They sanction drug abuse by promoting needle exchange programs for drug users. How can liberals say they want to stop the spread of AIDS, while they sanction practices that lead to it? How can liberals claim to be supporters of labor when they support environmental restrictions that limit development and eliminate jobs? How can liberals claim to support the expansion of the economy when they favor government regulations that limit entrepreneurship and when they tax profitable investments? How can liberals claim to help citizens achieve the American dream when they punish financial success through the progressive income tax? How can liberals claim to be helping people in need when they support social welfare programs that make people dependent on the government and limit their initiative? How can liberals claim to be for equality of opportunity when they promote racial, ethnic, and sexual favoritism by supporting affirmative action? To conservatives, liberals seem either immoral, perverse, misguided, irrational, or just plain dumb. Yet, from the perspective of the liberal worldview, what seems contradictory or immoral or stupid to conservatives seems to liberals to be natural, rational, and, above all, moral. The worldview problem for cognitive science. These sets of puzzles present a challenge to anyone who is concerned about the structure of contemporary political thought. To the cognitive scientist, they are important data. The job of the cognitive scientist in this instance is to characterize the largely unconscious liberal and conservative worldviews accurately enough so that an analyst can see just why the puzzles for liberals are not puzzles for conservatives, and conversely. Any cognitive scientist who seeks to describe the conservative and liberal worldviews is constrained by at least two adequacy conditions. First, The worldviews must make the collections of political stands on each side into two natural categories. For example, the liberal worldview analysis must explain why environmentalism, feminism, support for social programs, and progressive taxation fit naturally together for liberals, while the conservative worldview analysis must explain why their opposites fit together naturally for conservatives. Second, any adequate descriptions of these two worldviews must show why the puzzles for liberals are not puzzles for conservatives, and conversely. As we shall see, this is anything but an easy problem, and there are, to my knowledge, no previous solutions to it. But there is a third, far more demanding adequacy condition on the characterization of conservative and liberal worldviews. Those worldviews must additionally explain the topic choice, word choice, and discourse forms of conservatives and liberals. In short, those worldviews must explain just how conservative forms of reasoning make sense to conservatives, and the same for liberals. Moreover, they must explain why liberals and conservatives choose different topics to discuss and use different words in their discourse to discuss them. Those worldviews center on two opposing models of the family. At the center of the conservative worldview is a strict father model. This model posits a traditional nuclear family, with the father having primary responsibility for supporting and protecting the family, as well as the authority to set overall policy, to set strict rules for the behavior of children, and to enforce the rules. The mother has the day-to-day responsibility for the care of the house, raising the children, and upholding the father's authority. Children must respect and obey their parents. By doing so, they build character, that is, self-discipline and self-reliance. Love and nurturance are, of course, a vital part of family life, but can never outweigh parental authority, which is itself an expression of love and nurturance, tough love. Self-discipline, self-reliance, and respect for legitimate authority are the crucial things that children must learn. Once children are mature, they are on their own and must depend on their acquired self-discipline to survive. Their self-reliance gives them authority over their own destinies, and parents are not to meddle in their lives. The liberal worldview centers on a very different ideal of family life, the nurturant parent model. Love, empathy, and nurturance are primary, and children become responsible, self-disciplined, and self-reliant through being cared for, respected, and caring for others, both in their family and in their community. Support and protection are part of nurturance, and they require strength and courage on the part of the parents. The obedience of children comes out of their love and respect for their parents and their community, not out of the fear of punishment. Good communication is crucial. If their authority is to be legitimate, parents must explain why their decisions serve the cause of protection and nurturance. Questioning by children is seen as positive, since children need to learn why their parents do what they do, and since children often have good ideas that should be taken seriously. Ultimately, of course, responsible parents have to make the decisions, and that must be clear. The principal goal of nurturance is for children to be fulfilled and happy in their lives. A fulfilling life is assumed to be, in significant part, a nurturant life, one committed to family and community responsibility. What children need to learn most is empathy for others, the capacity for nurturance, and the maintenance of social ties, which cannot be done without the strength, respect, self-discipline, and self-reliance that comes through being cared for. Raising a child to be fulfilled also requires helping that child develop his or her potential for achievement and enjoyment. That requires respecting the child's own values and allowing the child to explore the range of ideas and options that the world offers. When children are respected, nurtured, and communicated with from birth, they gradually enter into a lifetime relationship of mutual respect, communication, and caring with their parents. Each model of the family induces a set of moral priorities. As we shall see below, these systems use the same moral principles, but give them opposing priorities. The resulting moral systems, put together out of the same elements, but in different order, are radically opposed. Strict father morality assigns highest priorities to such things as moral strength. the self-control and self-discipline to stand up to external and internal evils, respect for and obedience to authority, the setting and following of strict guidelines and behavioral norms, and so on. Moral self-interest says that if everyone is free to pursue their self-interest, the overall self-interests of all will be maximized. In conservatism, the pursuit of self-interest is seen as a way of using self-discipline to achieve self-reliance. Nurturant parent morality has a different set of priorities. Moral nurturance requires empathy for others and the helping of those who need help. To help others, one must take care of oneself and nurture social ties, and one must be happy and fulfilled in oneself, or one will have little empathy for others. The moral pursuit of self-interest only makes sense within these priorities. The moral principles that have priority in each model appear in the other model, but with lesser priorities. Those lesser priorities drastically change the effect of those principles. For example, moral strength appears in the nurturance model, but it functions not for its own sake, but rather in the service of nurturance. Moral authority, in the nurturance model, functions as a consequence of nurturance. Moral guidelines are defined by empathy and nurturance. Similarly, in the strict father model, empathy and nurturance are present and important, but they never override authority and moral strength. Indeed, authority and strength are seen as expressions of nurturance. What we have here are two different forms of family-based morality. What links them to politics is a common understanding of the nation as a family, with the government as parent. Thus, it is natural for liberals to see it as the function of the government to help people in need, and hence to support social programs, while it is equally natural for conservatives to see the function of the government as requiring citizens to be self-disciplined and self-reliant, and therefore to help themselves. This is just a mere hint of the analysis of the conservative and liberal worldviews. The details of the family models and the moral systems are far more complex and subtle, and correspondingly, so are the details of the political analysis. This overview is also too brief to discuss variations on the conservative and liberal positions. The full-blown analysis requires a lot more, beginning with a detailed account of our moral conceptual system. Hidden versus overt, descriptive versus prescriptive. Before proceeding, it is crucial to put aside two common misunderstandings. The first is that many people believe that they are consciously aware of their own worldviews, and that all one has to do to find out about people's views of the world is to ask them. Perhaps the most fundamental result of cognitive science is that this is not true. What people will tell you about their worldview does not necessarily accurately reflect how they reason, how they categorize, how they speak, and how they act. For this reason, someone studying political worldviews must establish adequacy conditions for an analysis, just as we have done. As we shall see, the kinds of things that conservatives and liberals say about their political worldviews do not meet these conditions of adequacy. If you ask a liberal about his political worldview, he will most certainly talk about liberty and equality, rather than about a nurturant parent model of the family. But as we will see, such directly political ideas do not meet our adequacy conditions. They do not explain why the various liberal stands fit together, nor do they answer the puzzle or account for topic choice, language choice, and modes of reason. Where just asking people fails, as it usually does, the cognitive scientist turns to model building, as I have in this book. The idea is to construct a model of unconscious political worldviews that will meet those adequacy conditions as closely as possible. A second common misconception confuses description with prescription. The models we are discussing are descriptive, not prescriptive. They are attempts to describe what people's actual unconscious worldviews are, not what they should be. Most theories of liberalism and conservatism are not concerned with description, but with prescription. For example, John Rawls's celebrated theory of liberalism is not an empirical descriptive study, but an attempt to characterize a prescriptive theory of justice, from which liberalism follows. As a descriptive account of actual liberal political stands on issues, it is a failure, as we shall see. My job here is to describe how people do make sense of their politics, not how they should. The same goes for the account of morality that I am about to give. I am interested not in what morality should be, but in how our very notions of what is moral are built into our unconscious conceptual systems.
And that was Chapter 2 of Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think by George Lakoff. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that determinism is optional.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized, so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.